Hi, this is my first time using Zoho, so I'm just getting a bit familiar with it. I can see that we've got a couple of people joining. I think we'll just spend a few minutes waiting to see who else joins. Maybe they're coming in from other webinars. There was just a fantastic one that ended a few moments ago by George Collier on bubble security. Absolutely phenomenal. So we'll just give it a few minutes. If you want to grab yourself a drink, pop to the loo, then do that. We'll start at sort of 4 minutes past 7 to give everyone a chance to get into this Zoho webinar. Yes, absolutely. I'm going to be encouraging us to use a chat. I thought that we might all be in like a Zoom meeting. I feel a bit more comfortable feeling like we're all in the same room. So please make use of the chat. I've got a nice little split screen setup going. So I'm going to be paying lots of attention to the chat as we go through. So just as people join, it'd be great if we could liven up the chat, maybe share the Bubble app, just the genre of app, what sort of thing you're building. Don't give away your secret sauce or amazing startup ideas, but just be good to share with me, give everyone else a bit of a taste of what you're building. So please, can we fill the chat up with some of the things that you're building, because I'm planning to kind of riff off that as we go along. Let me also share my screen, get us started. Here we go. Can I just have a bit of feedback in the chat? Are you able to see an Arc window that I'm sharing? Because like I said at the start, this is my first time using Zoho, and it's ever so exciting to use a new platform while doing something live. Great, thank you. We'll give it another minute to just let people join, as there's whatever platform we use, there's always hiccups and people trying to join and get in. Nice. Yeah, by all means, if you want to actually plug something that you've already launched, please do. So we've got AI assistants. That's quite exciting. Nice integration there with WhatsApp. Just welcome everyone. I thought we would get started in about a minute's time, just to give people a chance to join in. While we wait, please do post in the chat what you're working on. And as I go through and get started in a moment, I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat because I'd love to have a bit of feedback and some engagement. Okay, I think we'll get started. So hi everyone, my name is Matt. Bit of background on me. I discovered Bubble in 2017. I've been using WordPress for like a decade before that. So I was always sort of in the no-code space, even though I don't think we were using the term no-code back then. Like, I can't write a line of PHP. I could write a line of JavaScript. I could write a few lines of CSS, but I would definitely count myself as a no-coder. So when I discovered Bubble in 2017, it was a real penny drop moment, because I thought all of these ideas that I couldn't build in WordPress because I couldn't find the right plugins or themes, or I had to depend on someone, suddenly 90% of the ideas that I had, I could build. And that sort of led me down the road of becoming a habitual side project starter. There are pluses and minuses to that. The plus is I learned a lot. If I wanted to build an app that did transcription, I learned how to use a transcription API. A lot of what we're all working on now, I'm sure, is to do with AI, and so I'm immensely excited by it, and I just love trying out everything new that comes along. The downside of being a habitual side project starter is I'm constantly trying to reevaluate and evaluate how I spend my time and whether a project is really worth getting off the ground. I co-founded Planet No Code with a product guy and a marketing guy back in 2022, and we release new videos on our YouTube channel. We are focused on bite-sized how-to bubble content, educational content. We've got a few linear courses, and we're building more linear courses in the future. But the idea is that our library is approaching 400 videos. And if you've got a particular question, like how do I do tools, or how do I do system prompts with Claude in Bubble, you'll find a video about that in our library. And much of what I'm going to be covering in this webinar, you can actually find for free on YouTube. So yeah, my week is kind of living the dream without realizing it. I'm building internal apps for my own side projects, things we're working on at Planet No Code, and I do one-to-one coaching to really accelerate people when they're stuck. Before we launch into actually looking at like the Bubble API connector or other services, I just want to share with you something I came across in my studies. I'm doing a part-time positive psychology MSc here in the UK. And I wrote about AI and about AI's potential for positive impact on mental health. And in part of that, I came across this thing called media richness theory. And you might already be able to see where I'm going along, which is that AI started off down here. We had ChatGPT December, almost 2 years ago, I think now. And we had that amazing experience of where we could engage in what felt like natural sentences and natural language with an AI that could then also recall what had been said previously. And certainly an amazing moment when that came out. But we're seeing AI move up the media richness spectrum. I'm going to be demoing, hopefully get it to work, some voice focused, so voice first rather than text first AIs that you can integrate in with Bubble. But I believe that AI is heading up or to the right of the media richness spectrum. It isn't so far-fetched when you look at how easily video can be generated now, to perhaps how that can be expanded into 3D environments. And then once we get perhaps some more budget-friendly Apple Vision Pros or competitors to that, we'll be sitting in a room with a AI-generated 3D environment, probably engaging with AI avatars that have a human likeness, and their whole emotions and their communication is all AI-generated. So I'm quite excited by that, and I'm really excited about the potential that has on mental health. So I want to give you a quick demo of what I think is really cutting edge, or at least what excites me. As I've just seen a few people joining, if you've got any questions, please do light up the chat. I'll be happy to go down a tangent at any point. But I want to give you a demo of Hume. And I thought that we were going to be in Zoom, but we're in Zoho. And so I'm not entirely sure if system sound is going to come across in the screen sharing. If it doesn't, you're going to see a transcript. But effectively, I can start a call. And I've got a prompt here. It's one of their preset prompts about being a wellness coach. I mean, it's really well written. There's lots about how the AI is going to respond. But I can click Start Call. And I'm going to keep talking along to it. I'm going to say, perhaps I'm having a really sad day. And I'm gonna hit pause. Where's the mute or end call? It's all moved around. That's what I asked it to do. Let me refresh it. Where's the end call button? Anyway, you get the idea, and hopefully you saw it there, that Hume are a AI company that are building an empathetic AI with a focus on human well-being. We can get easily much of the writing about AI tends to be towards the negative, especially when you get people who are really at the height of their careers or in academia with AI. It can be quite negative. But I just wanted to launch into this webinar by sharing something really positive, which is what if we focus AI on empathy and human well-being? And the research, they published a number of research papers. So their speech can detect 25 different patterns of tune and rhythm. There's 28 kinds of expressions that they look for in order to match what you're saying to your emotions. There's all of these descriptors, such as basically the sounds that we make as humans that may not go well down in the transcription, or that we would expect from another human talking to us, but again, it doesn't come across in a transcript or an LLM that generates speech, such as your ahas and your sighs and laughter. And then facial expressions. I don't run the demo now because my webcam's going through Zoho. But once more, they've got 37 different kinds of facial expressions. So there is huge potential for apps using AI. One of the things that I've shared with some members of Planet No Code over the last 6 months is that if the only secret source to your app is your prompt, then that's quite a low garden wall to people being able to build a similar idea to you. Now, there have been some immensely successful AI apps launching, and they are simply benefiting from first mover advantage. But we can look at this cutting edge, and it may be a bit far-fetched. You may think that an AI can do a better job at detecting human emotion than another human. But all we really need is to, like in many of these things, like when it comes to text generation, voice, it just needs to do better than the average human. And then I think we're just going to accept it into our daily life. So you can imagine like a therapy AI, which can go far beyond what a human therapist is just practically capable of in terms of detecting what's going on with the client. We look at these 37 kinds of facial movements, and we are kind of subconsciously processing them, but an AI can quantify them, and then it can draw on thousands of different therapy sessions to improve upon itself, simply something that a human is unable to do. So that's kind of if to integrate in with the Hume API right now, you'd have to use a little bit of JavaScript. I am going to talk about Vappy, which is a voice-first API that you can already integrate in with Bubble. I'm going to come on to that later on. But what can you do already with Bubble? So you can do text generation, you can do text extraction, you can do image generation, and you can do voice-powered AI. Just for the folks who've joined as we've been going along, I'm not going to be demoing anything on here that you pretty much you can find it for free on our YouTube channel if you search for Planet No Code. But I'm going to go through a few of the items here. So if we go on to text generation, I'm not going to talk about streaming text. Now, this actually came up in a webinar a few hours ago, a question James's webinar about Cloudflare workers. Really worth checking that one out. Someone asked the question, can you stream text? So if you have spent more than 15 minutes working with OpenAI or Claude and the Bubble API connector, you will have found that the streaming protocol just simply isn't supported by the Bubble API connector. And some people get really hung up on that, and I want to make a counter argument to that. Let's head over into Grok. So Grok is an AI API. You can add it into your Bubble app right away. It follows a very similar API structure to OpenAI or Claude. The difference with Grok, this is Grok with a Q, not Grok with a K. Elon Musk's Grok is Grok with a K. This is Grok with a Q. Different companies, but confusing, hey? Their secret sauce is that they are running their platform on chips that are designed for AI computation. So if you bought NVIDIA stock more than 2 years ago, you're probably laughing and doing very well right now. It's a similar story here, that there is obviously a particular way of building hardware that is sole purpose is for making really quick and effective AIs. So here's why I think that streaming is just a tangent that is not worth going down. I have a system prompt and I have a user prompt, and I say write a webinar about Bubble.io and AI, and I click submit. And there we go. It took half a second to write all that. Even if you could stream that into your Bubble app, I think that's a bad user experience for your users because it's moving too fast for the eye to track. Even if you were to build like a ChatGPT clone and you could stream data in using, say, GPT-4o, I actually think that it streams in an uncomfortably quick manner. It no longer feels like someone is typing word to word for you at a comfortable reading speed. So yeah, my prediction there, the trends that I'm seeing is that AI is going to get faster and more powerful. That is just the trajectory, and more accessible for more people. That's the trajectory that 99% of all technology takes. So don't get hung up on trying to stream data into your Bubble app. I think the best user experience is the one that comes closest to the most familiar part of life, which is you see them on like bottom right hand corner, chatbots and websites. You see it in WhatsApp and iMessage. It is the ... Your friend is writing a message to you but hasn't pressed send yet. I think by far the superior user experience you can offer in a Bubble app is that you create, if I've got time, I'll demo this. You create the assistant message before you request you send the request to the AI. And then you have just a conditional statement on it to basically say if the content of that message is empty, meaning you're still waiting for the AI to respond, show a Lottie or a GIF, whatever you want, animation of ... bouncing along. And then once the AI responds, you save that data into the content field on your messages data type. And yeah, I think that is by far a better experience. You want to offer the user some indication that something is going on, but I don't think that streaming text I think it was amazing when ChatGPT first came out, just to go wow. But the speed of these things, if I did something simpler here when I tested it earlier, if I use a more basic model, it's going to take like 0.2 of a second to return a page worth of text. So I'm not going to get hung up on streaming. Let's start at the very basics. This is where I think the terms that we use can get a little bit confusing, is because I would certainly describe myself as a no-coder, but I'm a no-coder who's got to grips with API documentation and using JSON and detecting JSON errors. And that's something that comes through practice, but it's also something that you could just paste it into ChatGPT now and say, is my JSON correct? Or you could just Google JSON beautify, JSON validity test to test if you've got your commas in the right place, because you'll find very quickly if you put one thing out of place, it's not going to work. So I'm going to dive into a Bubble app that I've got going here, plugins. So here it is, that built in OpenAI, and I'm going to start built using OpenAI in the Bubble API connector. I'm going to start right at the basics, explaining everything, because this is something I go over and over with people on the Bubble coaching calls that I run. So you add in a new API, you ensure that your API key is in a private key in header, private key. You don't just add it in as a shared header value here, because your API key is like your password, and the worst thing that could happen is someone else racks up a huge bill on your OpenAI account. So always have kind of that budget, top limits, caps on your account, just in case something goes wrong. I'm actually using Arc Browser, and I'm using a what do they call it? The thing where I'm using a bit of custom CSS to obscure my API key in here for this recording, but you'd actually see it written out in your own Bubble app. So you then add in an API call. You can name this whatever you like, but this is what you would look for in your workflow builder. When you load it in, it's data, but you want it to be action. That just means that it is ready to be a node or a step or an action in your workflow. You leave this as JSON, because we're sending JSON, we're getting a JSON response back. Change this from get to post. That's what opens up this body section. You put your endpoint in this part here. If I go back to, so we've got content type application JSON. As of a few months ago, I believe Bubble made a change, which means that you don't need to include that. That's default unless you put content type something else, in which case it would overwrite it and replace it. So then we've got our opening curly brackets. This is copied straight from the OpenAI documentation. Every time I get started, whether it's OpenAI, Claude, or Anthropic, or Grok, I always go to the documentation to get started, and I copy and paste a huge deal out of it each time. So we're saying what model, and then we're just sending a single message. And this is a key concept to get your head around because our row 4 there, that's what the AI expects a message to look like. So I'm going to click initialize call. It says reinitialize because I wanted to test that this worked before hopping on this webinar with you guys. But we get this response back. If I go raw data, we can see what's actually sent back. And we get back a load of JSON, and it's all broken out into these sections. We have a choices part. Now, if you've been using the OpenAI API you started using it 2 years ago, you will have found that you can pass in an N parameter. So I can't even remember what my prompt is here, but you can say, give me back more than one response. Now, if you're building a chat app, it's unlikely that you'll want that because no chat interface gives you like 3 alternative responses to what your user has submitted. So it's always choices, but then we're only getting back one choice. So when we look to saving this in our Bubble app, we go the results of this step, and then we go choices, first choice, then message, content, and here is the actual response from the AI. I'm asking it to write some sort of haiku, I think. I'm going to click save. I click save because that's teaching Bubble what to expect as the format for the response of our API call. Okay, that's the basics. Let's take it up a notch. Here is a OpenAI API call, but this time we're using a system prompt. So in OpenAI, a system prompt goes into the messages as the first message, and you see here we've now got a comma. So if we wanted to add in another message below here, we would add in a comma. Commas go between the messages in JSON, and we insert our system prompt in here. So this time I'm saying speak like a pirate. Let's initialize. And there we go. We're now getting a haiku, but it thinks that it's speaking like a pirate. An important thing to realize here is that in Claude, system is not a message. System sits at this level up here. So in Claude, you could insert system between model and messages. It is not a message. It is a system parameter on the top level of the JSON in Claude. Right, let's take it up a step. What if we want to send conversation history? So we go back to this one here. We're sending 2 messages here. Now, if the AI responded, it would look something, the whole conversation would look something like this. So we'd say role, assistant. I think I spelled that wrong. I'm going to ignore that for now. And then it would respond with its content. And we just say something like, you see. Okay, just are building up for you an idea that this here is our conversation. It's a list of messages. And unless you use the assistance endpoint, which is in beta from OpenAI, which I'm not really recommending to most people because it is far more complex to integrate in with your Bubble app compared to the chat completion endpoint, which I'm using in this demo. So using chat completion, you have to send the whole of the conversation in order for the conversation to have that amazing historical contextual awareness of what's going on in the app. So in the messages part here, we need to have our messages, but not just the content. We need to express them like this. And I'm just going to show you how to build that really quickly, because this is a place that I notice that people get quite stuck with. So I've got a messages data type here. I'm going to add in an option set called role. So every AI API I've worked with all has a role parameter, and at the very basic, we have user and we have assistant. Oh, it's, yeah, okay. My spelling's not great. So here's a very rough. This is what you need to get started when building a ChatGPT clone. You just need an input and you need a button. So we'll just rename this as send. And we are just going to play with the idea of how do we send all the messages in the database so that we have the messages in the conversation. So I'm just going to add in a role here using the role option set. And that's all we need to get started with building a ChatGPT clone. Now, if we wanted to have different conversations, like in the ChatGPT web interface on the sidebar, you can move between conversations. We'd need to add in a conversation data type, but I'm not going to do that now. I simply want to show you this step here. Go back. So when we send, we need to send, sorry, when we need to create a message. So this is our content role, and the role is user, because the user gets the conversation going. Our content is our multi-line inputs value. So we're saving the messages in the database so that we can retrieve them and send the full list to OpenAI. So now I go ahead and look for plugins, and I look for send conversation history. Oh, and I've not set this up correctly. I'm missing something. Right. Yeah, it's not private. I plugged it at the start. His name just escaped me. The Bubble security webinar from an hour ago was phenomenal. So much vital information in that. I'd really suggest it. We don't want our message content to be private, because there really shouldn't be anything in the messages that needs to be private, because it's everything that's been generated by our users. So if I go back in here, we now need to insert our messages. But remember, we're inserting a list of messages that has to follow this structure. So I'm going to copy this and go in here, and I'll say do a search for messages. Now you can approach getting your list of messages in a number of different ways. This is one way, and so then I'd say format as text, and this is where the magic happens, because we now build a template for each individual message that goes into this text box. So I'm going to paste that bit in there, and then I just change it dynamically. So I say for this message, each individual one's role display. It's display because in our option sets, we have one default field called display, or attribute called display. And so we're printing in there either user or assistant, depending on whether it is a user or assistant message that's being sent. Notice I'm leaving the speech marks in there. I'm not JSON safing this because I'm in control of what values go in there, because I set the option sets as the app creator. But I will JSON safe this part here. One of the most common issues, if you just copied and pasted code from the API documentation, you've put your own prompt in and it doesn't work, is that you've not JSON safed it. So I would say in here, we'd say this messages content. So this is text, but it could include speech marks. It could include all sorts of punctuation that cause a JSON syntax error. And so we just say format as JSON safe. Notice the absence of speech marks. Format as JSON safe adds speech marks back in. And then the delimiter is the separator, which is just a comma. Okay, and that's how we do it. And so then to save our reply, we have message, we'll add all the fields in, we have our role. So this time it's coming back as assistant, and we're saving, as I described earlier, the results of step 2, choices, first item, message content. That's it. Okay, that's the basis of how you would send a full conversation history over to OpenAI. Now, I've got an eye on time. I appreciate that I initially booked this in for half an hour, and I've got probably another 10, 15 minutes of content, which I'm going to go through. But if you're booked into other webinars, then I completely understand that. So where was I? So we're sending conversation history. Right, let's have a look at Claude and why you might want to use Claude. Well, you might want to use Claude because you think that Claude 3.5 Sonnet outperforms GPT-4o at least using the API. You might also use Claude because you want a structured JSON response. Excuse me. So this is something which you can use JSON mode in OpenAI, but Bubble is not going to recognize the response as JSON. Excuse me. Let me just grab a drink. So you can use JSON mode in OpenAI, but Bubble doesn't recognize it as JSON. And you would then have to use another plugin or some complex extraction to extract the JSON from OpenAI's response. I don't know if this is OpenAI or I don't know if it's Bubble. And this is something that could be fixed in the next week by either side. Fact is, if you want structured JSON, Claude is the way to do it. And I don't think there are any disadvantages with using Claude's models instead. So I've got set up here something which looks slightly more complicated, but we'll just break it down. So I've got my model, I've got my system prompt. Remember in Claude, the system prompt comes as a parameter here rather than a message. I've got my max tokens, and then I've got this tool. And then I've got my messages. Now, I didn't write this out because if I wrote this out, I would make a mistake. What I did was take the example from the Claude documentation. If you search for JSON mode in the Claude documentation, and then I ran it through Claude ChatGPT even. Okay, so I put an example in that I was already working with. The point I'm trying to make here is don't write it yourself, or at least if you're anything like me, you'll make a mistake. Just use one of the AIs to write it. So let me demo what I mean and what's going on here. I'm saying write 3 tweets, and then the tool is saying write 3 tweets based on the topic the user sends. So the user is going to be in here. So I'll say user message. I'm removing the speech marks because JSON safe it if I was putting this into a workflow. And I could say bubble no code. And then it's just going to put out a list, like an array of 3 objects. Each is a tweet. Each tweet is going to be a string. And so then if I initialize the call, get back each item actually broken up in the JSON. You can't do this with OpenAI. You can do this with Claude. I'm going to demo what I had done with ChatGPT. Is I said, well, what if I wanted it to also rank them by how engaging it thinks it's going to be? So I simply said, here's my code for a tool for an LLM prompt, add an engagement rating for each tweet. And it adds in this part here. And I've used the AI to write it so that I don't make any mistakes. So I'm going to copy this part. And paste it into my Bubble app. I have to re-add my dynamic data. Say user. I say Bubble no code. Then reinitialize. There you go. I now have, for each tweet, my engagement rating. Yeah, that is probably sort of a meaningless number because I'm asking the AI to rate itself. But you get the idea that I'm returning a list of items that, you know, I've worked with 10, 20 different properties that I'm extracting from. I've used this in conjunction with a web scraper. So you get back an ugly mess of text that's scraped from a web page. The example I've demoed in the YouTube video is web scraping a job advert and then extracting like the salary range, extracting the salary range. And so you can do that. You can just add in more properties, and I'd use ChatGPT to write those for me. I do sometimes find that ChatGPT and Claude makes mistakes with JSON. They tend to add commas where there need to be commas, but you can very easily debug that by pasting it into like a JSON validation tool, and it will just highlight the line of where there's the error. But there we go. That is how, based on what is available today, I would go about extracting or you can extract data, but getting structured responses back from the AI. A quick word on lists. I'm asking for 3 here, but what if I had this as like a user? Do you specify Claude to answer in JSON mode? Thank you. Very helpful question. So Claude doesn't have like a JSON mode to actually turn on. What is important is that I have these required fields here. And it's got these because the code that I started with is copied from the example given in the Claude documentation under the heading of JSON mode. It's more of how do you achieve something like JSON mode. But it's also saying that the tool choice, this is vital. It doesn't make it 100% clear here, but it's effectively saying don't decide if you need to use the tool. You have to use the tool, and the tool is what gets the JSON mode back. I was just saying a thing on, hopefully that answers your question. If you've got any follow-ups, please do post them in the chat. Just saying on lists, if you wanted your user to pick how many tweets they generated in this example here, you would need to have a way of iterating, or in like a coding sense, looping through all of the responses to save them. If you know you're getting 3 back, it's a relatively small number. You could just create 3 workflow actions, create tweet 1, create tweet 2, create tweet 3. But if you needed that to be a dynamic number of tweets, you'd have to use a backend workflow, and then you would do it on a list of responses. And this is where the JSON gets really helpful, is because you can just say list through this, this value here in the response, and then you can pass all of this through into a backend workflow. So you would have a backend workflow that is run once per thing that you're creating, and you run a list on that once per thing you're creating. So you could create 100 tweets. If you ran that workflow 100 times and a list of 100 items, that's one way of separating out like X number of things that you generated in AI. That's what I've got on the demo side. What do my slides prompt? Here we go. So structured responses. This is what you'd search for in the Claude documentation. It's a really long page. Frankly, their examples are more complex than they need to be, but just scroll down to the example where it says JSON mode, and then put that into ChatGPT or into Claude and start describing what you actually want it to do. Right, other resources. These are some of the things that I find myself recommending a lot in the coaching sessions that I'm running. Right, if you want to take a really large database of information, say the context window on AIs is ever growing. When we got started, it was like 4,000 characters, so like a page and a bit of text, and now it's into the 200,000s, and it's only going to go up. But sometimes you might have, if you have a spreadsheet with 10,000 lines on it, how are you going to pass that into an AI? If you use the OpenAI Assistant beta, you can create an assistant and you can upload a file to that. But I would say the trade-offs of using the Assistant beta are so tough to work with in Bubble. I would consider building the data retrieval side yourself. And one way that you can do that is to use a platform like Carbon. You can see here, you might recognize some of the brand names down the bottom. Carbon gives you the ability to upload PDFs, huge bits of text, CSVs, you name it, you can upload. You can even connect Carbon to a Google Drive folder, and then anything you put in that folder, it's going to chunk it up. And it effectively makes all of that content searchable. And then you use the Carbon API. So if you've got a recipe book in there and your user asks, can you provide me a pizza recipe? Your recipe book has got 1,000 pages. The point of Carbon is that it's going to, you can say, return the 10 most relevant pages and order them by relevancy. And it's going to then return, hopefully, the first result would be about pizza. But then, it might get less about pizza and more into things that are similar to pizza. That's what you can do with Carbon. And so you would combine your user's initial query, send it through Carbon, combine both into your AI request. And that is how you take a large amount of data and you reduce it down to just relevant data before you pass it into an AI, both improving speed and cost. If you don't want to get quite so technical and you want to keep it visual, Carbon is like an API. It's just an API. VectorShift is amazing. They've got some fantastic templates. If you just want to build a knowledge retrieval chatbot that sits on your website, you can do that in VectorShift in 15 minutes. You don't even need to use Bubble to do that. But if you do want to use Bubble, all of the pipelines, their equivalent of workflows that you create, they have got APIs. And so you can basically offload your 10-step API workflow, chaining different API requests, retrieving data. You can offload that to VectorShift. And so then your Bubble API, your Bubble app is just calling the pipeline API endpoint that you get from VectorShift. There's also Plum. The team from Plum are amazing. We worked with them a few months ago. So they're doing a similar like drag and drop workflow pipeline builder focused on AI. They're really worth checking out. They do some incredibly advanced things with chaining together multiple AI prompts and outputs, like extracting sentiment or half a conversation from a transcript, that sort of thing. And then I only discovered Helicone. They were on Product Hunt a week or so ago. If you just want to know how well your scaling of costs is going to be in your Bubble app, Helicone is like a proxy for API endpoints. They support all the major players. And effectively, you just change the endpoint and one other part. So your API call goes through Helicone, and then it tracks costs, prompt. You can get feedback. In fact, I was going to give you, I think Helicone is a bit of a no-brainer. So here are all the services that you can run like a proxy through Helicone. But you can do caching, user feedback, fallback. If OpenAI is down, you can send it on to Claude. You can have retries. You can do custom rate limits. You can do that by day. You can do that by user. You can group requests by user. You can see how much a particular user is spending each day in your app. So you can, I'm building an internal app that takes a lot of data in the context window, and it needs to be using some of the more expensive models. And so I want to see exactly how much each of those is costing me. And some of the console, the platform dashboards for like OpenAI and Claude display that information, but often it's really limited. I actually found it was really frustrating. I just wanted to know how much a single call to Claude had cost me, because I wanted to multiply that up, thinking, well, if a user uses this 100 times or 100 users use this each once a day, how much is that going to cost? Helicone gives you some amazing metrics. They have just changed their pricing, but I'd still say it's really good value, and they've got a very generous free tier. Cool. So what's next? Hopefully I've signposted what is helpful and what is relevant as we've gone along. We've got our YouTube channel, we've got our website. Across the two platforms here, we've got near 400 bite-sized Bubble videos. A lot of what we've created recently is, of course, following the hype of AI. So I would just recommend that if you're stuck, if you want to find how to do something, give them a search. Some of our videos are exclusive to our members, so you can only get them through our website. Can you not calculate the cost after each API call for Claude? Yes, you can. So you do. Let me go back a step. I'm coming to an end here. Yes, you can. You do get, inbound, outbound tokens, but then you've still got to multiply them up, and you've got to check the website to see what the most recent pricing is. I just want to keep it simple. I want to see the data in front of me. Cool. This is a plug for where I'll be in 15 minutes. So I mentioned that I co-founded Planet No Code. One of the guys I co-founded it here, this guy is Sean. He will be joining me in 15 minutes in this webinar. If I build it, will they come? Because as I said at the start of this session, I just started building apps when I found Bubble in 2017, a bit like a madman. And I had no strategy. In fact, we're going to be launching into this webinar by looking at an app that I launched in about 2018 and what I could have done better, because needless to say, I'm not working on it now. It flopped. Sean is a marketing guru. He's got experiences in both large and small startups. And he's basically going to be walking me through what I could have done better and taking any questions. So if you've got an idea, you're learning no code, and you're just in that excited phase, have that down to earth moment now and think, well, do I actually need to know stuff about marketing? Have I got a marketing plan for when I launch my Bubble app? Because otherwise, TLDR, if you build it, they probably won't come. You need to have a plan. So thanks so much for everyone engaging in this conversation. I hope that you've taken something away useful, and we will stop things there.